When everything has gone to plan, the people of the Offstage program will now join us for the debate. A debate is a place for exchange and challenging ideas, and today our debate will focus on cultural credibility. On stage, we will find Stavros Karelis, Leila Fattar, and Glenn Martens. It will be moderated by Christophe Morancy. He's editor-at-large of influential global media brand High Snobiety. Please give them all a warm applause. Here are the four speakers.
Thank you for joining us and staying so long. First of all, my name is Christopher Morancy, and I'm the editor-at-large at youth culture title High Snobiety, based in London. And we're speaking about this ambiguous term today, cultural credibility, which it's ever-changing. You know, as luxury evolves, cultural credibility evolves, and in its essence, it's really, we were comparing it earlier to a Margiela tag in the neck. You know, that's the main difference between what a cultural credible brand is compared to any other white t-shirt brand. And if we think about cultural credibility, why it's so important, we look at youth culture as well. And there were these recent figures by Boston Consulting Group stating that the global luxury market is set to become $405 billion US by 2025, and that's up from 330 billion last year. And of that group, there is a bit of a big driver from the youth culture side.
Sure.
Now we have the millennials and the Gen Z who make up 58% by 2025 of that group, up from 44% last year. And when we speak of cultural credibility, we look at the elements that, you know, what made a luxury brand back in the day. It was high price points, exclusivity, timelessness, heritage. And that's evolved now. It's not enough to really drive demand from the new age consumer nowadays. And I want to speak a bit about how streetwear has influenced that, but also what the new pillars are of cultural cred. And
Sure.
maybe start off with you, Leila. If you look at 10 to 15 years
Thanks, Chris.
putting you in the hot seat. If you think about 10 to 15 years ago about what luxury was, it was quite transactional, quite one-sided from the brands.
Yeah.
You know, how would you describe that?
For me, luxury brands was absolutely inaccessible to the rest of the people. So that exclusivity bit, I think, was extremely important. I think what Lucy was talking about just before around this idea of exotics being luxury, so the leather, the snake skin, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these things, which are obviously quite hard to get, became more expensive and so were inaccessible. So luxury felt a bit like that from my point of view. I think it's different now because luxury is accessible in a different way and it means something new today. So this whole idea of like knowledge we talk about and feeling about this idea of sort of luxury consumers versus consumers of luxury, I think is a really interesting area where people sort of jump in and jump out. So I have on today sort of, you know, Jordans and Uniqlo and Hermes, and that's cool. And of course, I'm feeling I'm representing Antwerp with my merch. So feeling like that's somehow doesn't make me less luxurious, I think, than before, where I think this probably would not have been the signifiers of luxury, I don't think. I don't know what you think.
But I think it also was very dominated by one type of customer in the past. Of course, and this customer was very much orientated to a very classic Western way of thinking. It was very much dominated by history of hundreds of years of European fashion. So I think luxury in the past was all about tailoring, flu, this kind of things, and I think that's definitely where we see change today.
That's probably my South African background, definitely from a third world country, so all good, yeah.
And I think something very, very important for all of us, you know, to notice is that luxury back in the day meant more exclusivity, and now we're talking about luxury today, which is about inclusivity, and I think this is exactly where the whole game starts changing, because I mean, I was trying to remember, you know, like the designers that maybe, you know, became as a milestone to make the difference in that transition from something that it was about exclusive and very specific demographic, and then the new customers, as you said, the Generation Z, the millennials, the youth culture, and how they came on the arena and became very, very important to designers. And I want to say about, for example, a designer like Raf Simons, who, of course, Belgian, great designer, one of the masterminds, but at the same time, he was somebody that talked about youth culture, but in a very genuine way. It wasn't about, okay, here is a new demographic, there is a new customer base, which is about youth culture, for example, so let's design about them. He was genuine, he had a very strong opinion and emotions attached to it. And I think that the youth culture at that point, finally said, oh, here you are, some designers have started designing for us. And this is how I think it started changing. And of course, there are a lot of other designers doing the same thing. It was Kim Jones, it was a lot of other designers. Glenn is doing it. It's a lot of new brands that are coming along right now doing this.
Yeah, I want to start to talk a bit about the cracks, when we start to see the cracks in the traditional luxury system and what we know as luxury today. And an important year for that was, I think, 2016. It was really the first year that Demnak Vasalia showed his menswear show for Balenciaga. Had Alessandro Michele at Gucci that was getting into his rhythm, as well as Virgil with Off-White. And you felt this change happening at Fashion Week. It was no longer about the insiders. It's almost as if the outsiders had found a way in and were now dictating what was happening. Do you remember that pivotal point in fashion, how that was?
I do. I was at the height of streetwear culture, actually, which is actually been, for me, one of the most interesting shifts within luxury. Not only fashion, but beauty, whatever. The influence that sneaker and streetwear culture has had on that has been humongous. Everything from product to communications to drop culture to... and I think that that's really exciting for someone like me, because that's my background. And I love the fact that, and I love this idea of inclusivity. For me, that's always been what streetwear culture has been about. And sneaker culture has always been, if you're passionate about something, you can get it done because you build your tribe and you got your crew and you got your mates, and that's how it works and that's how you build. And that for me was probably a really sort of pivotal time, and I loved it, actually. I still do.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I also think the pioneers were way before. I mean, like Helmut Lang, Margiela, they were all like doing it already, like since a very long time. It's true that in 2016 or in that area, it became like a norm. It became like a norm. But then again, I mean, like if you see about, I think what's very specific about that era is that at the moment when people started making like millions of turnover by branding, by logos and T-shirts and sweaters, that's really more, I think, the case in that era. Which I think that, you didn't have before. I mean, now you had like big luxury brands actually selling not luxury as luxury, which is a bit different.
When you started,
I agree.
When you started Y Project, Glenn, what's the approach that you want to bring to luxury that was different from the establishment back then?
Well, the thing is, of course, we are playing with all different kind of product categories, so we have streetwear references in there, but we will never go for straightforward T-shirts with a print. I mean, for me, luxury is really about, my personal opinion of luxury is about craftsmanship, and it's about like a different intellectual take or artistic take on a piece. So basically, when I have a sweater, there's like 7 sleeves and whatever, and things you can pull off, and you have no idea how to put them on. But that's, I think, where I really go for. That's my personal take and what I think is luxury. So it's very personal, direct. Yeah,
it is, and to be honest, just to be clear, I'm not saying that streetwear, I said it influenced luxury. It doesn't mean that it became luxury. So just be very, very clear.
Sometimes it actually...
It did.
Which I think is very odd today.
Yeah, but for me, I just really felt like it was an in for us, basically, where we had a lot of people and a lot of luxury brands looked at what we were doing on street level and appropriating that. Actually, just bring us in.
Which is refreshing.
It's all good. But that's exciting for me. That inclusivity and that open door is what I'm talking about. But so it's not necessarily about lack of craftsmanship, sorry.
No, absolutely. But I think the main difference is that some brands did it organically and in a genuine way, and some other brands didn't do it that way. And I think this is where it became the main difference, basically. Because I think also what we have to value quite a lot is that customers nowadays are extremely educated, extremely informed, and they can read through everything in quite much more quicker way. I mean, if you try to sell an idea which is not genuine, I think customers really easily can read through it, which perhaps wasn't that bit back in the day.
And they not only read through it, they talk about it.
Loudly
absolutely. And quickly and fast.
Too quickly.
I feel that with like luxury nowadays, all of a sudden it's become about this intangible thing called credibility that streetwear has done so well for all these years, and we'll break it down a bit more soon what the elements are. But the big problem with these traditional luxury brands is that they've adopted the streetwear aesthetic to become cultural credible. So they've done like a hoodie in leather, or they'll do like a nice leather sneaker, whereas you have to adopt the attitude and the mindset.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. But it's appropriation of any kind, right? So whether you're a designer who goes, I'm inspired by batik, instead of using those Indonesian designers and textile designers to come in and create your stuff, don't do that. Use them, bring them in. And that, for me, is that attitude that I think is super interesting. I talked about it actually at Business of Fashion when I met you at Voices with Dapper Dan. So I was on stage with him, who was, for me, the hero of...
the hero,
and for some people, polarizing, appropriation versus celebration of a culture. So I guess, interestingly, this idea of just... If you want to work with the community, if you want to be part of community, just bring them in, work together, co-create. And there you will get much more authentic stuff. And if you can bring these two worlds of craftsmanship and this attitude, it's a beautiful thing, I think, or
Which
should
is
be,
very
or could
freeing.
be.
I think it's a very exciting moment in fashion.
Super exciting.
Because
That's what I'm
everything
talking
is open.
about.
We're freed from stigmas, freed from the
Tradition
historic
and the,
costumes that we used to wear.
And
So
this kind of like shackles of what it should be and what it could be. That's fashion for me.
I mean, we go straight to the first component, I think, that builds up cultural credibility today, and that is community.
Yeah.
And I think you had a word with it the last time we spoke for Somebody. There was this word for people to work with, to recognize. Was it cultural pioneers?
Cultural voices.
Cultural voices.
Yeah,
people. Can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, people for us who really shape the community and represent the community and shape the culture. They may not be the biggest social media influencers. They are the people who are behind the scenes really pushing things forward. They're the workers, they're the grafters. Those people are really interesting, and sometimes you don't see them too big on the front, but they're there in the back kind of changing everything around. They for us are cultural voices. And
as a brand that wants to be cultural credible and wants to work with these cultural voices, how do you identify them?
I think for me the most important thing is to first understand what you're trying to do with your brand, right? Because you know, we were talking a bit about a big brand trying to jump onto a streetwear way of being things. They don't need to. They have their own brand values. They have their own DNA. They have their own stuff. So first of all, understand what that is. Then think about the community you're trying to be part of. And really, the community you're trying to be part of should match those values in some way.
But also...
And then who are the cultural voices within that? Sorry, apologies.
But also think something very, very important is that there are designers. Part of a designer's role is actually to educate, to push boundaries, to inform,
100%.
to show something completely new. It's not just a reactive situation of what, for example, a customer wants. Because if you only go to design in that way, and probably you know how to answer that question much better, but you know, like if you go that way only, I think there is not a long-term stability there. I think that right now, you know, a lot of designers, good designers, have to educate and push the boundaries in many, many ways, and this is also part of a huge cultural credibility. You know, that how you do that.
Absolutely. The you know, brand DNA, if it's successful, it's there for a reason. 250-year-old, it may be a heritage brand or whatever it might be. There's so much value in that.
But you can't talk to every single consumer. That's also the problem, of course, of today is that the consumers are not the problem, but the good thing is that it's such a diversity of people. So you have to stay integral, and that's the thing you feel directly when a brand is really like going for a market plan, like a business plan. It will maybe work for a little while, but it would always fail at a certain point.
But that's why understanding who you're trying to talk to and who the people who are cultural voices within that and influence them and working with those people might help. Of course, it's going to be hard.
If it's part of your personality.
If it's part of your values and your DNA, exactly. It's that beautiful intersection, which is really hard to find, and what makes certain brands successful and certain brands not. But it's a hard space to find, and that's the job, really.
Glenn, when we talk about community, how do you go about it? How do you make sure that what you present to the world equals the values you have with your community at Y Project?
Well, I'm quite spoiled in a way that actually the brand is very much reflecting what I try to live. So I try to be a person which is very diverse. I try to be able to sit here in a fancy talk, but also like go camping. I can feel comfortable clubbing in Berlin as going to a castle. So I think Y Product is very reflecting that diversity of people. So it all happens very naturally. And indeed, I mean, like we are some people. I mean, like I think we have a quite big relevance also on streetwear and street culture. But I don't do logos and I don't do all those kind of things. And people, I think, feel there's a more honest approach because that's also who I am. You know, I've been wearing the same pants since 5 days, and I don't really care that much. So, yeah, it happens naturally. I think that's really important. You have to just stay true to yourself, and that's when it works.
Where does collaboration come into that? You know, when does the sharing of minds between one company and another, benefits both brands in terms of cultural credibility? When is it a good fit, and to what extent should brands look at collaborations? Let's start with you, Stavros.
Oh God! I mean, I'm a bit funny about it, to be honest with you. Because I think some collaborations, again, when they're genuine and they're coming, from a perspective where it has something to say and something to tell, and it's something new, is of course a great opportunity, to learn from each other in terms of collaboration, to bring the right elements from two brands and connect them and present something new. Also, is part of what I was saying before, in terms of education, perhaps, because again, if you think different collaborations, especially with some artists, it doesn't mean that necessarily all young people or any customers, do know about this artist. So, you kind of educate them, but it has to be genuine because it's a lot of collaborations at the moment that they're happening, which they're becoming more tiring than actually exciting. Lazy almost, like it's just, okay, I'll put my name on it because, it's good money or it's a good opportunity for me, to test a new type of product. So when a good collaboration is happening, when all the components are working very, very well, then it's a great, great way, to become wider, to send your message and communicate your message in perhaps not your traditional, typical customer that you would have beforehand. But again, it has to be something genuine, it has to be something cool and something, that is worthwhile for somebody to pay the money and buy it. Because just to see the product be made, but with a different price tag, doesn't mean anything anymore.
I mean, collaborations.
It's so much fun, though. As a designer, it can be so much fun.
It is fun, but it's also at like peak collaboration.
I know, but for me, for example, when I do collaborations, really, it's a product that I can't do, like sunglasses.
Exactly.
I can never do sunglasses independent brand. That's the great thing about today also is that I finally can do products which I could never have touched before.
And this is where I definitely feel like there's space in the world for collaborations, but for stuff like this. I don't think a t-shirt brand, great. I mean, nice, but fine. I think what's interesting now is collaborations are shifting even from between fashion and fashion, sunglasses and yourself, to products and fashion, IKEA and Virgil. You're like, which I think is an interesting thing. As someone who is extremely cynical about these things, because I'm old and I've been around for a long time, something unexpected would be really interesting for me, and something that is unexpected and interesting, can stop, and actually has a value somehow, I think would be great. I feel like the next set of collaborations that need to come forward need to kind of subvert what we've done today, because I feel like more product, I'm not sure we need more product, but anyway.
But a collaboration is almost like a relationship, so it cannot be one-off thing. I mean, it can be one-off thing, but, like the best way is actually when it's organic and it's a long-term relationship between designers or between brands, because then you can actually evolve and develop and show the full potential. Probably they have to be good friends or people that they respect each other, or you respect the brand that you're going to collaborate with. This is when it actually really works. I think the other way around, what we see nowadays is that, for this season I want to collaborate with this brand or this designer, but it's a one-off thing. What's the point of it? It doesn't have any depth into it.
That's why Ideas has always worked so well, right?
Yeah,
For collaborators.
Exactly. So, me, for example, as a retailer, when I'm being offered collaborations, I want to know how long this collaboration is going to last. Is it going to be a long-term thing? Because then, how you engage with the customer, how you make the customer to actually come and buy into it, but also have him or have her satisfied and in a long-term situation, because it's not just one-off thing, out of the door, we're done with it.
I think that's a really, really good attitude to have, because it's the same as when I was at Adidas, like the Stella
McCartney
collaboration is brilliant. Also because, brands like Adidas and Nike, the others, have big technology in sportswear. Like bringing that technology to fashion is really interesting. Bringing bringing mutual benefit in different ways, like you were talking about, is interesting. And to create something completely new out of it, that's where it becomes super exciting.
Just shouldn't be forced.
It just shouldn't be forced. It needs to feel kind of natural. And I think what was great about her particular collaboration, not only was she sustainable, and this was a thing, but she created sportswear that women wanted to wear that was performance-led, as opposed to just visually looking good. It actually had technology. And that, for me, something with a bit of a benefit, always works for me. I think that's interesting.
When I think of cultural credibility, especially nowadays, and how evolved it's become, you know, what differentiate one brand from another.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that comes to mind for me is standing for something as a brand.
Of course.
You know? It's like the values that you have now need to be aligned with your consumer. I see brands almost as friends. You know, you expect them to be loyal. They have to stand for the same ideas. And that's across sustainability. That's across political beliefs. That's across a broad spectrum. You know, what is the importance of standing for something as a brand now more than ever? And what do brands get right and what do they get wrong?
I mean,
Whoever wants to answer this
one. That's literally almost why I started Platform 13, is to make sure that you had this as authentic and as credible way of actually working with brands and their communities, right? So whatever we do has to have an impact in the community. It doesn't have to be worthy, just needs to be positive for whatever they need to do. But I think importantly, one of the most exciting things for me within communications is this idea of corporate communications mixing with consumer communications, and actually that becoming one thing, because actually it shouldn't be separate. So you talk about sustainability. Sustainability was always like the corporate press release that goes out to another set of people, whereas now it needs to be front and center within your normal communications. Actually making sort of part of your corporate communications around sustainability, the gender pay gap, maternity, all these kind of things should be front and center, as you've seen even from other examples now. That's where the brands that are bringing that and showing their values and showing this important bit front and center actually is really important, because we need it. Brands have a responsibility because they can sell stuff to people.
I think it's extremely important,
Hugely
for
important.
now, a designer to have a very strong opinion, a set of values, and emotions that they can create emotions with what they do. Those three things are very important. Those three elements are very important. Me as a buyer, I will never buy a collection if I don't see a strong opinion from a designer, like a strong point of view, a clear point of view, like of what they stand for, who they are. But also customers and consumers from their side, they also want that. They want to, they're not going anymore about the brands that they don't know who designs it for, why they're designing for, and what they stand for. It's the three elements that they have to be shown. At the same time, we all know that we're talking about sustainability, which is very important, inclusivity, and so many other very important issues that we have to consider and take into consideration in whatever aspect of this industry we're working on. But this cannot become the reasons, to justify somebody's work. They have to have a very clear perspective. If they don't care or they don't want to talk about it, they don't have to talk about it just because
they feel they've got to tick a box.
They have to tick the box, because then it also becomes not genuine.
Inauthentic,
and
100%.
inauthentic.
Have you seen a change, Glenn, in terms of a reshifted focus on communicating what you stand for? Or do you want the consumer to feel it right away?
Well, I think you have a responsibility as a designer in this industry to communicate properly, obviously, because there's so many people following this industry and so many people who are not even able to buy it, who are obsessed by it, they dream through it. So communication is definitely key, I think, to what luxury is. We have responsibilities to talk about sustainability because we can't think about it. We have the time to think about it, and we have to teach. I think it's a bit the thing. We have to teach people what's happening. And
100%.
on the other hand, I also don't feel obliged because, of course, I'm doing Y project. There's a lot of creativity in there. When I make dresses, which are supposed to just be show and which have no market value and are not supposed to be produced in big numbers, they can be in polyester and any kind of plastic material. I don't really care because it's really a one moment thing. But you have to be aware, though, that you have an impact on society little by little, especially with the big brands.
Yeah, brands have a huge impact on people. They have the weight to change opinion, and they have the ability to change opinion,
But
and that's important for any brands. I feel, yeah.
But also the consumers have the biggest power out of everyone.
Of course.
And then that's basically they are the ones that they can actually dictate in most of the ways, especially right now, what is important, because they're the ones that they, in the end of the day, paying, and we all consumers. So what they want is very, very important to take into consideration, because ultimately
100%.
they have 100% the power into their hands.
Yeah, I mean, the most cultural credible brands have this two-way dialogue now, right?
That's it.
Yeah,
And credibility is about, or relevance is about people talking about you. People are going to talk about you positively if you're making an impact on their lives. Now, that can be, as I said, it could be worthy or it doesn't have to be. Escapism is awesome and we all need it. Fun is great. Let's have some of that too. We don't have to always be doing everything. So it's positive impact, because if I'm sitting having dinner with Stavros, I'm going to go, blah, 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 this brand did this today. That's what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily going to talk about the new colorway they put out. Maybe I will, if it's a fashion thing. But generally, it will be talking about what has impacted me in my life. That is relevance when people are talking about you positively.
I'm very keen to hear from all three of you what brands you guys think are doing it well when we speak about cultural credibility. What brands have earned this credibility in society nowadays? Maybe let's go for a recent example.
I mean, for me, from my industry, sort of Noah feels like a great thing.
Noah.
Noah. It's a smaller brand, hugely influential within cultural voices. But I think what's good about them is that they're just really honest and transparent about the fact that they are producers of product, but they are trying really hard in their way to do what they need to do about their impact on the environment. They are community orientated.
Yes.
He has huge credibility from a brand like Supreme. He's the designer from Supreme, so he already has that credibility within the industry, and so what he says kind of feels like something that people might follow, which I think is brilliant. He has a responsibility and he's taking that to the next level. And the clothing is really easy to wear. So for me, super easy. Feels like a good brand, just thinking off the top of my head, but yeah, I'm sure there's loads.
Stavros or Glenn, do you have anything to add to that one?
Okay, well, I already mentioned Ralph Simons, so I won't mention it again, but I do believe in terms of consistency that this is a cultural credibility, because as a brand you have to be consistent as well and be able to deliver. From younger brands, and I'm not saying it because Glenn is sitting here, but I do believe that Glenn and Y Project is one of these brands. Glenn knows it because I have been there, since the beginning, with the brand, and I've seen all the way that he has handled the brand, and the way what he puts out there is very, very important, because again he speaks in a very clear language, but also he speaks in a very specific demographic, which then it almost goes and gets bigger and bigger in a bigger audience, and that's something that gives me safety as a buyer and as a founder of Machine. I think Matthew Williams of Alix is doing it as well. Kim Jones is doing it in that sense. So I do believe that there are quite a lot of brands that they are getting it, and designers that they're getting it right. And I'm sure there are going to be even more and more designers coming along. Yeah. What is the key element, I think, for the future is something that we have discussed before together, which has been in the overall discussion of what we're saying and talking, is how much we put out there and the business models and how we're going to adapt in the future. Because I think one of the biggest challenges will be how we change the business model of our companies, and saying, instead of spending more and shopping more and producing more, is how you buying smarter, how you buying less but buying better. So that would be the future challenge.
I've had this conversation with some friends about the brands of the future will be looking beyond product alone.
Sure.
Yeah. We did a recent a big research firm. We did a collaboration that's coming out next month, and one of the biggest things we found that the young generation now wants is to buy into a brand. Yes, they care about product and they care about the quality and where it comes from, but they want to be associated with the brand themselves. So I think the best brands of the future will offer something else than products. You know, it will be access, it will be knowledge, it will be community beyond, you know, something physical.
Yeah, I'm really proud of the Vans KK outlet store, which is exactly what we tried to do with Vans. So worked with them on their new boutique, which was shown by Lucy on the Trends report. And actually, within Covent Garden, which you can imagine a very expensive space, quite a big store, we've taken over the basement, and that's really to create a space for emerging and young creatives to come and learn, to sell their wares. We're not taking any profit. They are selling their wares straight out of the basement, and we have this ongoing program of stuff that's happening over the next year. So exactly this point, we're seeing that real shift, and it's bringing people into the store. They love the brand already, but it's actually adding this extra value, this impact that I keep on talking about, that's positive for the community they're trying to be part of. And that's super, super exciting, and it's great to be part of that change.
I see that we're out of time, but just to wrap things off, I want to speak about cultural credibility in the future. What are some of the elements that will still exist, that will create luxury? You know, what is luxury of the future? What are some of the elements that will go away? Which ones will be added in? Which ones will remain?
I think what you said is integrity, it's craftsmanship, it's being unique and being true to yourself. Don't lie. You have to have also respect. Respect your customer.
I think that's actually covers most of what I would say as well.
Respect.
Absolutely.
I think you need like a strong voice. I think you need like a clear attitude. I think you need emotions. And I think you have to, as very, very wisely said, respect your customer. And actually, you know, think about that success, whatever it means, is a very subjective term. And it doesn't mean that I'm here to satisfy everyone and I'm here to conquer the world. You know, it's about actually, you know, like to be able to do something good for the people, whoever that is, that will appreciate it.
Exactly. That impact we keep on talking about is not dissimilar. Impact doesn't have to be, as I said, it's respect is one way of doing it. You know, thinking about your customers and going, actually, instead of you buying our product, we're going to give you something back. And that's really, for me, that kind of conversation that happens two ways. Sorry. I think we're out of time.
That's a perfect note to end on. Please thank my guests and thank you guys for coming along.